Okay, you are seeing my screen, as I assume. So yeah, so user interface design. Here is a small Dilbert comic to start with. It's maybe a little bit caricature of a real life, but sometimes it can be surprisingly accurate. So user requirements, 400 different features, and then no human would be able to use a product with that level of complexity, but when you add easy to use as a requirement, then it's okay. So, okay, so why is user interface design needed in the first place? And what is the reason why you do it, or why people do it? Is that you try to give some capability of controlling complex features or complex products. And here is an example of ovens. So on the left side we have this classical analog oven, and then on the right side this computer-controlled digital oven. And with both of these, you can do the same things. You can cook. The oven on the right side has in addition to basic on and off settings, it has some cooking programs. For example, it can monitor the temperature inside the oven. You can use different kind of sensors to monitor the food what you are cooking, and then based on reading the value of those sensors, the oven and its program can then control the heating automatically and then provide good results. Of course, you can do it with the left side oven also, but you need to do it manually by reading a thermometer maybe inside the food in the oven, and then based on the readings, you then need to manually modify that now we are using the high power, now we are using the low power, we are using the top or bottom grilling mode, and so on. So with both of these, you can get the same things done, but on the digital oven on the right side, you have these advanced automatic features, which hopefully are useful to you. And then to control these advanced automatic features, you need to have some kind of user interface. And somebody needs to design it, that how does it work. If the design is poor, then these complex features, however useful they might be, are not used because they are too difficult to use. And then basically the whole idea of the digital oven with its advanced cooking functionality, then it's kind of lost. So in a sense, you are controlling this kind of state machines with this user interface. Then some terminology, what you might encounter if you read some literature or about this topic. So there is this term user interface design, and then there is this term interaction design. They sound kind of the same thing, but they are not. So user interface design, for example, if we are talking about this kind of digital devices such as mobile phones or computers or tablets. So the user interface design is basically focused what is inside, what is shown on the screen, and it's kind of more on the technical implementation. And then the interaction design is basically how the user is interacting with the whole system or the service. So here a good example is that if you would be thinking about user is wanting to travel from, let's say, from Helsinki to London in the old pre-corona world. So the user wants to travel from Helsinki to London. So probably he will resort to flying. So that is his goal. The user goal is to do the travel. So interaction design would concern whole this process that, okay, how does the user get to the airport, what the user does at the airport, how has the user acquired the tickets, has the user acquired them by calling, has the user acquired them by using some kind of booking application on computer, or how does it work? How does the user move in the airport? How does he get to the airplane, and then so forth? So it is this whole interaction with the service, and this service is now this travel service, this airline travel service. Whereas user interface design would only concern how does the booking application, for example, at the website, how does it work? So interaction design is a much higher viewpoint than user interface design. So user interface design is only one part of the whole interaction design process. Then there is a third term called user experience, and when for the user interface the acronym is UI, for the user experience the acronym is UX. And this UX again is kind of an umbrella term. It is quite closely related to the interaction design. Here is some of these circles which try to show that what things how they relate to each other. So how this user experience relates to each other. So so the behavior circle now includes this interaction design. So the user experience is again kind of like maybe one level higher, or maybe parallel level, depending on how you see it. So user experience tries to account for the whole user experience of the system, whereas user interface is just maybe some on how the elements are laid out, not necessarily, for example, what is the text presented there, or let's say that if the system includes some other features, maybe some kind of notifications or some other forms of contacting, maybe emails or even phone calls or text messages or so. So all that belong to the user experience. Okay, so then if you talk about product design in general, so it is surprisingly how many products are not, or maybe the not is not a good word, but are lacking in the actual design part. So the product has been created and it is sold and marketed, but before doing all that, the design process has not really been thought out very well. So so it might be that the designers, for example, let's say the programmers or user interface designers of the product, they not necessarily know or care that, for example, who is the user and why would the user in the first place use this and what for. and if this is the situation, then it might be so that the product is completed, but then it is not what the users want and what they would be willing to pay for. So, and then this can lead to a problem if the company is trying to make a living out of selling some product which does not really find its audience. And then quite often it can be so that some problems in these products, they are also created by this kind of priority conflicts. So if you think about how companies work, is that there are typically people in three broad categories. They are the business people, they are the marketing people, and then there are the developers. So business people are those who who care about that. Okay, how do we make money about with this product? What are our expenses in creating the product, and what is our income? Do we sell it with a one-time fee? Do we sell it with a subscription? Do we make money maybe with some kind of advertisement scheme or some kind of affiliate scheme, or how do we make money, and how much do we need to pay to our, let's say, to developers that we can get the product created? How much money we need to invest to marketing? What are our fixed costs, and so on? So there are the business people who care about that kind of things, running the company and trying to make a living, trying to earn some money with it. Then there are the marketing people. Their goal is to market the product. So their ideas might not align to for example, the world of developers. So very often it becomes so that the marketing people can easily promise something which in fact is in conflict with, let's say, the business people or with the developers, or both. So marketing is, for example, promising that, okay, yeah, this will be ready for Christmas, and there is a big marketing campaign. There are TV ads, printed ads, online ads, and all this. And then the reality is that the product might not actually be possible to have ready by Christmas. Okay, so what do the business people then do? Okay, maybe they reach the conclusion that we need to ship the product as incomplete because it has been marketed so. We have invested all this money in the marketing. The product is close enough, so they think that we will get by. But then it might be so that the problems are so big that there is no financial success with the product, and then everybody is unhappy. So typical situations in user interfaces and in applications, what you see and what you can notice, and then so the probable reason is that the application has not been designed very well or completely, or there has been some kind of rush in the process, is that there are all these kind of cryptic error messages to the user. For example, here, what you see, a couple of examples here on the right. So these kind of error messages are typically only useful for the developers, but very rarely the users are developers. So if you get this kind of error message, then it's typically a sign that the application design has not been done very well, or the application has been created in a rush, because these kind of error messages should not really be displayed to the user at all. And if the option to react to these error messages is OK, button to click OK, the user has no effect on how the script at line 34 is executing, then showing this kind of error message is pretty much worthless, and it will only confuse and possibly anger the user. Then another glaring example is that an application might require the user to give the same information multiple times. So even though it just asked it, maybe a good example of this would be, let's say, an e-commerce application. You want to buy some shoes, okay? You must sign into the e-commerce application to make an order. You give some basic information, and then you go to the checkout process. Maybe the e-commerce application is using some third-party billing application or billing service, and then to use that one, you again need to give the information, for example, your name or address again, even though you just gave it a couple of minutes ago, but in essence, you gave it to a different application from the technical point of view, but from the user point of view, it was the same. So again, this way you are giving the user some problem and making them frustrated. and all kind of overloading, that making the user to remember the application state and giving some frustration with that, or showing unnecessary information or things like this. So when the product design has not been thought out very well, then these kind of things happen. And here is now one figure which tries to indicate that what kind of priorities the different people in the company have. So here the divide or the split into categories is a little bit different. There is no the marketing is not here as a separate. It is included in the management and business people. But here there is a new category, the designers, and then the technologists who are basically implementing the application. So this tries to convey the situation that when creating a product, different kinds of people working in different professions in different professions, they must work together to create a product which should have an overall product success. So the product should be designed with the user in mind. Then there should be a reasonable and sustainable business model behind the product, and then this designed product should also be implemented by the technology people, and all these three or four, if we split the business people into the marketing as well, all these categories must, or the people and their goals and their schedules, all these must align, so that then there might be some product success. And now how the design process of an application goes is so that it is split into different phases. Here is one example of that shown. It is by no means the only possible one, but just as one possibility. Typically, you have the same kind of activities depending on what is the development process, but then the order of the activities might be a little bit different, or how many times they are done. But this is one example. So typically, the application design, and now we are talking about the design process, not the whole implementation process, but the design process when you start creating a new application. So you should do some background research. And as the outcome of this research, at least should be that who are your users and why would they be using this product and in what kind of situations. And then from that information, you can then derive requirements for your application or for the product. That how should it work? What are the requirements? How should it work? And then things like quality requirements for let's say some delays. How long should different things take at maximum and so on. And then when you have the requirements in place, that what should this do? Then starts the actual design process, and then in this design process you must answer to the question that how these things what you have listed in the requirements, how they are achieved in the application. And then the design can be split into multiple phases, like we will see shortly. And then once the design is completed, then typically the implementation starts, and then quite often the implementation phase also needs some support for the actual or from the original designers. Okay, but before going into more into these details, let's have a break. We'll have a break of 20 minutes. will continue at about 9:15 or possibly 9:20, depending on how I get back. But at the latest 9:20, I try to make it back to 9:15. So when you begin creating a new project or product, first thing what is a good idea to do is to do a little bit research. And if you are doing this for a customer, or if you are doing it for as some kind of company internal project, so for your own company, you should discuss with all the people who are involved with it in some way. So with all the so-called stakeholders. And the idea with these discussions is that you should try to find a common vision which everybody can agree on throughout the whole organization. Because if, for example, some business people have a different idea what we are creating or are about to create than, for example, the designers or technology people, then the outcome will not be very good. So the idea with these discussions is to get a common understanding that, okay, this is what we are going to be creating and for these people and for this reason. And then if you're dealing with some kind of topic which is not trivial, like if you're doing some kind of tax related application or medical application or anything which is which has some regulation or is beyond your own area of expertise, then definitely you should include these so-called subject matter experts. So if you are doing something for the taxation, you should bring in tax experts. If you are doing something for medical purposes, you should have the medical experts there, and so on. So that whatever is the topic, the subject area, that the experts of that subject area are also heard. That you are not going to be doing anything which is in conflict with, for example, some regulation or some procedures or something like this. So then also one thing what is a good idea to do is to think about, does this product have any competitors? If so, then do a little analysis of those. What are the good things in those and what are the bad things in those competitors? How could you improve? How could you make your product work better? And then here in the slide there is this state of the art review. So this refers to that if the thing what you are doing is something what has, for example, some scientific research going on with it, then you should also, or it's a very good idea. Of course, you don't have to, but it's a very good idea to also include the analysis of that the state of the art, so-called state of the scientific research to this phase. That what is going on there has some new breakthroughs or new points of views being uncovered. And then one of the most important things is to think about your users. Who will be the users of this application? And what is their behavior? So in which situations they would be using this product and how this product would help their work or their whatever they're doing. And for example, if you are creating some kind of application to, let's say, to improve some logistics process in a warehouse, let's say. So obviously this is a process which is going on now and your product aims to improve it. So you should discuss with the people who are working there in the warehouse now and see how they are working now. Observe them. How is their process going on now? And then you can see that, okay, this is the way how our application could improve the work of these logistics people here in the warehouse, so that the warehouse process, be it storing or unstoring or searching stuff from the warehouse or ordering or whatever, so that it might be improved in some way. And here it's a good idea to discuss with those people, to interview, but it's also a very good idea to observe them during their work, because very few people are actually capable of describing their work process in such detail that that everything could be uncovered from those discussions. So this is the kind of thing what you should do when you are starting to create a new project. Of course, it's not mandatory to do all these things, but if you can do those, it will greatly improve your chance for success. Okay, so this phase brings you quite a lot of information. Then you should analyze this information. And one way what you can do, again, this is not the only way, but just one way how you can proceed with this analysis is that based on this research phase information, you create this kind of user archetypes. So these archetypes, you can create them based on, let's say, some behavior, some attitude, some skills or goals or background and so on. So one archetype could be, for our warehouse example, would be so that, let's say, an experienced warehouse worker who has been 10 years in the process of loading trucks, for example. And then another person could be an inexperienced warehouse clerk whose process is to, let's say, to monitor the warehouse storage capacity or something like this. So these archetypes are like people what you can identify, people archetypes, what you can identify from the pool of people what you have been researching as your users. And if you're going to go on and create these kind of archetypes, these so that they are like models of your users, one important thing is that they should always be based on actual observations. It makes very little sense to come up with these kind of archetypes, at least in great detail, because they will be just the product of your imagination, and then it is limited how much use they could be in real life in the design process. So creating these archetypes is one way what you can process, but of course it's not necessary. You can directly go on and analyze the different things what you think that should be doable with your product, and that is then the requirement specification. So requirement specification is the phase where you document that these are the things what our application should be capable of. You do not document yet that how it is done. So you don't document that, okay, there must be a button here which the user clicks and then he goes there and then he sees this and that and so on. Not like that. But you just decide that, okay, these kind of functionalities are required of our application. So it is required, for example, that the application offers capability of exporting warehouse storage data in Excel format, for example. So you do not decide that, okay, how do you activate this export functionality? But you just list that this kind of functionality is needed. And very important point in creating these requirements is that you must document them, and then you must discuss these requirements with your project stakeholders, so with the same people that what you discussed with in the beginning phase. And especially so if you are having some kind of customer project, if you are doing something for someone, then it is critical that you discuss about those requirements, and is it critical that you both agree on every detail of the requirements. And the reason for this is that the requirements are those that what the designers and the implementation is going to go after. And if there is any disagreement what some requirement means. So for example, if you are now the designer or the programmer, you're going to be designing some feature into the application. If you understand the requirement differently than what the customer understands it, then what you're going to be creating is not what the customer wants. And that is a disaster situation. So absolutely critical phase in requirement specification is that you discuss with the people who you are creating this product for and who are the key stakeholders, and everybody should agree that yes, this is what we are doing. And this means that writing these requirements, that they must be written as clearly as possible, and there should be no ambiguous words used. So nothing like, okay, the product should work with good enough speed, or it should be easy to use, or that it should be faster, it should be so and so. So all the requirements must be as detailed as possible, and only with that way you can get as good as possible outcome as you can, as it's possible. If there is any ambiguity in the requirements, then it is just based on the luck that will the end result be what the customer, for example, wants. Okay, so in this situation, you can, if you have created the archetypes for the user models and those user archetypes, so you can, in this requirement specification phase, you can also create these user scenarios. So you can write these scenarios that in which your user models, these archetypes, in which they are using the product. And again, these should be now based on the observations. So then from these scenarios, it is possible to derive the requirements that, okay, yeah, this is the kind of functionality what we should be going for. But this does not eliminate the need for actually documenting in detail and in a clear manner the actual requirements. Okay, so then when you know what your application or product should be capable of, then starts the process of user interface design. And the way how I recommend this to be done is that it is split into two phases: initial design and finalized design. In this first phase, you should create a simple concept which describes that how these functionalities which were described in the requirement specification, how do they actually work? How many views your application will have, what is presented on the screen, and how is the screen laid out. But you do this in very rough detail. So like you see here on the screenshot, that basically this phase you should be working with pen and paper, or with similar quite crude design means. So in this phase, the most important thing is decided that what is the general layout of the application we use, and how is the navigation going to be working? What kind of views your application will have, and how does the user move on between these views? How does the user interact with your application? This is the most important part of your user interface design. Then at the next phase, you bring in the visual candy stuff. You bring in the colors, icons, images, fonts, actual pixel perfect spacing, and so on. But this is the candy stuff. This phase is the most important one. If you go with a very bad navigation logic, for example, there is no way how some visual candy can fix that. The application will be simply with a bad navigation logic, no matter how beautifully you present the application user interface. So these are the two phases how I recommend that you do your user interface design. Then when you have done the finalized design, meaning that as the result of this finalized design phase, you have basically user interface design, which shows all the screens exactly as they would look like on the finalized product on the device. So that should be the outcome from this one. And then that design result could be given to the programmers, to the implementers, and it is their job to make the application to look exactly like what it was designed here. So the programmers should not be doing some design decisions by themselves. It should be the designers who are doing the design decisions. But if it happens so that the design is incomplete, or if some unexpected situation happens, then it is a very good idea if the designers can give support to the programmers during the implementation phase, so that the programmers or the people who are implementing the application, so they should not need to make design decisions. For example, if the designers had forgotten or overlooked some detail that, okay, then the programmers would suddenly decide that, okay, how is this going to be presented? And if that happens, then there is a big chance that the user will see bad design, cryptic error messages, and stuff like that. And key thing to remember in this whole design process is to fail fast and fail often. And this is because of the diagram which is seen here in the bottom of the screen. That the further away in the project you are, the more expensive it is to make changes. And this is pretty easy to understand. If you want to make a change when you are in the requirement specification phase, if you want to add a new feature, that user should be able to use Facebook to log into the application. It is as simple as that. Write that sentence there to the requirements. But if the whole application has been, for example, completed almost, the application is in the testing phase, and if at that moment you decide that, yeah, by the way, we should have the Facebook login, or we should have some other feature which was not thought before, it will be very costly to add these features later on. It is the same thing that if you think about if you would be building a house. In the requirement specification, you would decide that, do I want a single story or multi-story house? Yes, maybe I want a house which has 3 stories, 3 floors. Then you go on and start the project. The builders start to build. They make the foundation work. Then they start to build out the building frame. Maybe you are building it with from concrete and so on. And the pipes are being laid out. The electricity is being wired there in the concrete elements. And then you decide, let's go with the 1-story house. And by the way, I want it to be the same square area, but just in 1 story, 1 floor instead of 3 floors. So you can understand that making modifications like that would be pretty expensive, because the whole building would need to be demolished basically, and everything would need to start from all over again. And it's the same with software. So the later on you make changes, the more expensive they will be. And for that reason, when you are designing an application, you should find your application problems as fast as possible. Now I have a question for you. How can you find problems in application design as early as possible? How can you do it?
By testing.
Yes. By testing what? What would you test?
In the case of design, I will test with users, like how they navigate through the application with just mock-ups, for example.
Yes. Yes, that is exactly so. So even before you have written, or anybody has written a single line of code, you should have tests. So that is a very important point. That way you can find what are the problem points in your application, and you are failing as fast as possible, and you are saving money. So that is a really good way to do it. Okay, we will talk about then in more details. So probably you have heard about usability sometime. It is quite commonly discussed when talking about user interface. So usability is basically something what you can measure. So it is a quality metrics. How easy it is to use an application to achieve a certain goal. And you can measure these. You can time certain things. If you say that, okay, let's see, how long does it take to user to send an email with this application or to send a new invoice? That is a task which you can give to the users, and then they try to do it, let's say with your design, and then you can time it. Does it take 5 seconds or 7 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds? Whatever your result, if you're unhappy with it, then you can improve it and run the tests again with new set of test users. And then you can again time it and compare the results. Did your design improve? Is the time, average time, for example, better now for this task? Okay, so that is one thing what you could do. What else do you think that that could be counted when thinking that, okay, how is this usability good? What are your ideas? Or in general, if somebody asks that, okay, is this good product from the user interface point of view? Is the usability good? So how could you answer to that? What do you think? What should be thought of at that moment? Again, there is no right and absolutely wrong answers here, just different points of views.
There must not be any bug.
Yeah, that is for certain.
It must be easy to use.
Yeah. What does it
that
mean?
It takes into account, for example, people with visual problems or audio problems, if that's part of the application.
Yeah. Yes, definitely so. Especially if the application is such that it will be used by people who have visual problems. Some applications might be so that there are no people who would be using that kind of with that kind of visual problems, for example. For example, if you're creating an application for some military purposes, it might be that there is a selection process for the users. That selection process eliminates people with visual problems. It might be so. But if you're creating a consumer product, then very likely there are consumers with different visual problems, for example. So yes. Any other ideas? Yeah, say if you had something, just say.
Technical assistance must be good, so that if there is some bug, they need to fix it in short time period.
Yeah, that is maybe more on the support process, not so much on the usability itself. The usability has already suffered a hit if there is a bug, but then on the support process quality, then yes, that is always, of course, a positive thing.
Okay.
So here are 5 usability attributes by a person called Jacob Nielsen. He has been working on the usability scene for many decades and has a very good reputation and has released several books about the topic as well. He has these 5 usability attributes. So 5 things what you could actually measure from the users. So it's learnability, that when you have a first-time user, how easy it is to do something. Then efficiency, that if you have an experienced user, how fast they can do something. And then memorability, that how easy it is to do these tasks if you have had a long break. So this is almost like this learnability. Then errors, and these are not now the errors in the application, but mistakes made by the user. So how many mistakes does the user make when he's using the application to do something? And then can the user recover from those errors? So for example, if you delete something by accident, is it possible to get it back, or is it gone forever? Then very subjective criteria, satisfaction, how pleasant it is to use the design. This efficiency and learnability, a good example of a very big user interface, like let's say categories, is I think it's a good example. If you think about this kind of mouse-driven graphical user interface, which, for example, Windows or Mac OS is providing. The positive side in this kind of graphical user interface operating system is that it is fairly easy to use, because you can visually see the different functionalities. They are available as buttons or menus and so forth. Then in the other end of the user interface, let's say spectrum, could be command line user interface. In the command line user interface, you must know the commands, what you want to do. You must know their options. They are not helpfully presented on the screen, and so on. So it is quite slow process to learn this kind of command line user interface, but then its efficiency is quite high for a seasoned user. The efficiency can be much higher than on a graphical user interface in Windows, for example. If you need to find some menus, you need to navigate multiple views to find some option and then set it off. Whereas in graphical user in command line user interface, when you know it, you just might need to execute one command with, let's say, some property, or modify some configuration file, which you know that exists and you know that where it is. So it's very fast to do, because you can access it immediately, compared to the mouse-driven graphical user interface. Even if you know where it is, it takes time for you to navigate, to move around the menus to get where you want. So that is a good example of that, I think. So these are all things that you can measure and then compare the measurement results when and if you run some tests and do some modifications. Then there is something called usefulness. And it means that you might have something that has a great usability, but if that thing does not have what you want to do or need to do, it is useless. And likewise, some product or application might have a really useful feature, but again, it is useless if you do not know how to use it. Okay, so when I had the question about the testing, somebody mentioned a mock-up. So let's talk about those things. When you are designing a user interface, you typically operate at these 3 different levels. And this is the terminology what I will be using from now on in this course, especially if I give some exercises. So it's a good idea to memorize these three things. So a wireframe means simply that the design is basically sketched. It has no colors in it, and typically this is a tool for the initial process. So here this one, what is seen here on the bottom right, this would be a wireframe. So as you can see, it is drawn simply with black and white, maybe with a couple of shades of gray. But the idea is to be just a simple tool to present the general layout of things on the screen, of elements in the screen, and then how do you navigate? How do you get from one view to another? How do you operate the application? So that is the wireframe. Then there can be so-called interactive wireframe, which means that if you do this wireframe design with a computer, there are programs which give the capability of having interactive wireframes, which mean that you can, for example, have buttons or some elements, and if you click on those, then the computer will switch to another view in the wireframe design. So this kind of tool gives you the possibility of running tests quite nicely for the users. Then there is the mock-up, which means that this is now again the final visual outlook. I can show you here if we Google. Mock-ups are typically something like this, or here. So the idea of these mock-ups is to give you is to show you maybe a small handful of views which are representative of the views in the application, and to serve as a platform to show the finalized user interface design, meaning that to show all the fonts, colors, icons, images, and things like this. Here we have only 3 views, but immediately it is visible here that, okay, this would be the visual outlook of the application. But from this mock-up, you don't really see how the navigation works. You don't see what are all the views, what are all the features. You only see this kind of idea of the graphical presentation. Then when you have the mock-up plus all the views and the interactions, then you have a prototype. So you have the final visual outlook plus with the interactions as close as possible or as close as needed in the application, so that you can show that, okay, this is the application, how it would look like, and this contains all the views, everything as it would look in the final product, and you can use it in some tests, for example, by clicking, or sometimes even by writing some information to, let's say, to some fields, and the application will remember it and then use it in the further fields. So this is a prototype what can then be used for very detailed user tests. So these are the 3 design levels what we typically are talking about: wireframe, mockup, and then prototype. And the most important decisions are done at the wireframe level. That is the most important part of the design. Of course, if you totally fail your to finalize the design with proper visual candy, then the result can also be a failure. But if we assume that the visual graphical design, the visual candy will be at least okay, then the decisions made at the wireframe level, those are the most important ones. And you don't need a computer to do these phases, even the prototypes. Okay, here the prototype basically means this is like an interactive, like a paper wireframe prototype to be exact. So it's not, as you can see, it's not showing the finalized visual design. but this is like a wireframe prototype, and you can do this also with paper. So here you can see on this right side, these views of the application have been drawn here on a paper. And then somebody has cut a cardboard template of a mobile device. And then you can show this to the user that, okay, this is what you would be seeing on the screen. Then the user can say that, okay, I would click there. And then this template would be moved, for example, to show this view or this view and so on. So already with pen and paper, you can run quite good tests. And to create this kind of wireframe prototype, doing with the pen and paper, it is infinitely faster than doing with a computer. You could say basically that you can have this ready by the time you have only started your computer and started the design software. So this doing design, initial design, or the concept design with pen and paper is very fast. The pen and paper is something what I absolutely recommend you to use in the very beginning of every design process. Especially so if you're going to be working in a team, because when you are using pen and paper, it allows anybody to participate. When you go for computer tools to participate, the person needs to master these computer tools, and that is not a trivial thing to do. So with this pen and paper, anybody, even an office clerk or the cleaner or whoever, your grandmother or whoever could participate and comment to the design in a meaningful way and offer improvements. And as I said, this is extremely fast way to do, especially in the beginning, very quick to discuss about different ideas, how something could work. Much faster than any computer tool. Here are some pros and cons. These pros are what we already mentioned. Here is one thing what I did not yet mention, so that when you are doing it with pen and paper, you are not limited by the tool, because that is something what can happen quite easily with the design tools in computer. But there are, of course, some certain situations what you cannot do with pen and paper. You cannot, for example, emulate very well some touchscreen things, interactions like pinch zoom, for example, and so on. Wow, there's quite a lot of typos here in these texts. Okay, well, anyway, and then also one thing, what tends to happen that when you do design on computer, even if you show a wireframe design, for some reason, people get to focus or tend to focus on the wrong things. They maybe start to argue or commenting about your use of fonts, or should there be 5 pixels more here, white space, or maybe less, or something like this. When you are presenting something like this to anybody, it is automatically clear that, okay, this is just a sketch. It does not represent what would be seen as a final version of the screen. But when you are using a computer to show wireframes, surprisingly large number of people start to talk about these kind of things, these wrong things. Because the most important thing on the wireframe model, wireframe phase would be to focus on the user interface logic. So how is information presented and what is the navigation flow? Okay, then about how to test. Yeah, okay, we already discussed about those. Okay, then about the software design tools, computer tools. These should be used after you have worked on with pen and paper. So typically all these user interface tools, they are vector-based. Do you know what that means? What does it mean to have a vector-based design or drawing tool. There are a couple of ways how you can draw with the computer, draw some shapes on the screen, and how those shapes are stored and manipulated. You can draw pixels, like, for example, here in this MS Paint. Now I am drawing pixels. So if I would draw here some user interface design, like so. Okay. Now I have drawn this with pixels. If I would like to modify, for example, these circles here, I have used a pixel-based drawing tool. What I need to do is I need to erase these. And then I need to go on and draw them again. And doing this is madness. Makes no sense. Instead, what we are doing is that we are operating with vectors. So these are, for example, vector-based elements. Now I'm doing this in PowerPoint. Here I have a rectangle. When I have a vector-based design software, I can modify the shapes of the elements. I can move them, I can change them, and so on. This is the difference between pixel-based. And one big difference is that that when we are dealing with, okay, this is not, the zoom is not working very nice here. But when we are dealing with vector-based shapes, it offers us infinite zooming capabilities, because these vectors, what they are from the computer points of view, they are just basically mathematical equations and coordinates. So when you change the zoom level, the computer can draw the screen again based on those mathematical equations and coordinates, compared to a pixel-based information which is stored in the memory that, okay, now at this coordinate there is a black pixel, this coordinate there is a red pixel, and so on. When you zoom in, the computer cannot generate any more information. So all these user interface design tools, they are vector-based because you must have the capability of moving the elements and modifying the elements around. Then almost all of them have these widget libraries. It means that you have some kind of this kind of menu where you can have some user interface elements like buttons, which you can then drag and drop to the screen and then resize and modify as you see fit. Sometimes you might have platform-based specific widgets, which means that if you, for example, have Android widgets, they are then these elements, they look like native Android buttons. All these operating systems, they have their default user interface widgets available for the software developer, and they have certain look and feel. Then these tools, they of course allow you to export to different formats so that it can be presented in a PDF reader, in a web browser, and so on. Then most of the tools have some kind of interactive prototypes at the minimum. They are clickable buttons, which changes the view. So what it means is that when you start something called preview mode, the application would display only this on the screen. Then, for example, you could have in the design, you could have added this kind of some kind of link or feature to change the view. For example, when this is clicked, then what would happen is that from here, it would go to this view, and then this view would be displaced. So when you build it this way, then the user can basically click through the application and use it almost as if he or she would use a real application. Some tools, they have some programmable logic, meaning that you can, for example, enter some data in one view and then have it visible in another view, or there can be some conditional logic that in certain situations this element is visible and then other situations that element is not visible. Then the tools have some theme features. You can do real-time code design, for example, shared designs, multiple people work together on the same design. There is some version control. And typically, the tools store the information in the cloud one way or another. And there are many, many tools for user interface design. The one which we are going to be using is this Axure RP. The reason for that is that for Axure RP, you can get a totally free user license, and this license does not limit in any way the amount of people who can work in the same design team. These other tools are also very good, but typically they limit the team features. So if you have not yet done, now is the time to start downloading Axure. For Axure, there is this free trial. It's a 30-day trial. Or what you could do is that you go here from the buy button and then click here, request a free education license. Then here is a form to fill. This is something what I mentioned last week. Okay, let's have a break of 15 minutes and continue at 10:20. So let's see a little bit how does this Axure tool look like and how does it work. Oh, some updates. So it looks like this when you open it. Let's see. Yeah, like this typically. Here is the widget library that's vanished for some reason. How can I dock it? Okay. Okay, so this is how Axure looks like. So here on the center, this big area is your design area where you work. And then here on, typically here on the top bottom left is this libraries view, where you have these widgets, which are now the shapes what you use to build your user interface design. And by default, the Axure has these couple of libraries, these called default flows, icons. And then you can bring in additional libraries. And there are also paid libraries available, but we are going to be using only these default free libraries. So how they work is that you find the shape that you want to use, and then you drag it and drop it on the screen. And there you go, you have now this box here. Then here you have these control points. So you can move the shape however you want. You can see the details in this gray box there. It's the coordinates, X and Y, width and height. Then from these control points, you can move and resize the shape. And then let's see, was there rolling here somewhere? No, here this yellow triangle here allows you to make these rounded edges. And then when you start building this, start adding more elements, you can see that there are these red help lines being shown. So these can help you to align the elements in different ways and show what is the spacing between them. For example, there is now showing the pixels there, and then here it shows that what is the middle point, and it's especially evident if you have different sized elements. So many times you want to have them exactly centered, aligned. So these tools will help you, and they can be toggled. Let's see, where is it? Is it here on the project? Somewhere here typically is a setting. Okay, yeah, here, view, rulers, grids, and guides. So here are these snap settings that allow you to control that whether or not they snap like this, and they have like these sticky edges. So depending on what you want, you can put them on or off. And then for each element, you can modify their style here on the right panel. Here is the style, interactions, and nodes. So style, you can control here, modify the size individually. Here is a lock symbol, which maintains the aspect ratio, meaning the width and height, locked or not. Then you can here change the location as well. Here is for rotation, if you want to rotate it for some reason. Then you can control the opacity, meaning the transparency, how transparent it is. Then here are some typographic settings. So almost all these elements allow you to write something inside by double-clicking. So you can add some text like that inside an element. So these typographic settings control those. You can change the font. So here are a couple of different font categories. These web safe. These are fonts which should work for everybody. And then here these local fonts. These are fonts which are only on my computer. And this has an impact that if you are sharing your design in Axure, Axure has this cloud service which you can use to share your designs. And it is shared through a web browser. So if for example, I have selected that, yeah, I want to use this black oak font here. And then if I share this design, then the other user might not see the font in the same way, because if they don't have this black oak font, then they see something else. That is what it's doing here. Then you can have different font styles, font size, font color. Then you can have the line height here, character spacing. And then you can have the alignment, where it is aligned. The text, is it on the top, middle, or bottom of the element? Then you can set the element filling, fill color here. Or you can have some image there. You can have the border. So it can be some border, whatever you want. The border can have different patterns. So there are a couple of different border patterns as well. Then you can have borders only on certain sides. Here the visibility. So that left side, no border, and so on. These allow you to control that one. Then you could have also these arrows. Let's see. I don't know why it's not activating now, but in principle, you should be able to have these arrows as well. I don't know how to activate them now. Then you can have the shadows for the elements, the outer shadow and the inner shadow. And then here is the corner setting, which is also available there as the yellow triangle. So you can set that one. And then here are some padding which affect inside the element if you have some text there, like so. So yeah, so here from these building blocks you build your user interface. Then this this concept of a page, we are now, as it says, page 1. Here, when we have not selected any element, here on the right side in this style menu, we have this page dimensions. Here on the auto, it has this very big. If I click on the control and then use mouse wheel, I can zoom in and out. This is a very big work area. If you want to work on some kind of restricted size, then you can, for example, do it from here. Here are some mobile phone sizes, for example, iPhone 8. Now it sets the work area so that the screen width is what you would see on an iPhone 8. And then it can help you to size up the elements in a correct way, that if you would be doing mobile design. Here on the vertical size, you can see that it is bigger, because that way it offers you the capability of doing scrolling, for example. And then this adaptive view, this is basically the media query things, that if you want to try or do it so that your user interface design changes based on the screen size. So here on the adaptive view, you can do that one. And then you can, of course, choose here on this custom device and set whatever you want to be for the width of the page area. Okay, so the logic here is that you use a single page for a single view in your user interface design. And always your designs have multiple views. So what it means is that you will have multiple pages. And these pages can be named. Here it now says page 1. But let's say that if we would have some kind of application, I will now quickly create, for example, that if this would be like some kind of login view, a couple of input boxes there. Labels are general text components. Okay, so if we would have this kind of application here, okay, let's put it back to mobile phone size. So here, if I would have some, for example, a sign-in view, it makes sense to name this one so that this sign-in, for example, or login, or however you want it, because you will end up to have multiple of these pages, and then quite soon it becomes difficult to remember that, okay, what was this page 7 or page 62 or whatever. So it's a good idea to name these pages. So then when you want to have a new one, here is a plus icon, add page, click, and it creates you a new page here. So then this could be, for example, let's say, some kind of dashboard view, maybe, depending on what is this application. Maybe I have here some, maybe there would be some graphical components, for example. Let's say that they would be users, and then, or let's say that this would be maybe visitors, display that one. This would show then purchases, and then for example, if we would have some kind of e-commerce application dashboard or something like this. Okay, so in any case, this would be now second view. So the one what we are now seeing here, this is now the design view. When we want to see that, how would the application look like? So we then need to use the preview mode. So here on top right is this preview with this green symbol and this play icon. If I click there, so what will happen is that Axure will open this in a web browser, and it will start from the first view. Here on the left side, I can get this. I have these panels, but if I would like to make a clickable prototype, so that when I click here, it would switch the view to this view. I need to do it here in the editing thing. I activate this button. This is the one which I want to have some interaction. I go here to interactions menu. Then I click here as a new interaction. It shows all the interactions what these elements can have. Now what I want is that when I click on that button, something happens. I use this one, click or tap. And then what should happen? Here are the actions, what can happen based on some interaction. Now what I want to do is that I want to open a link. So these are called links. And then it says that, okay, link to where? Now I can choose here that to my dashboard. And then, okay. And now I have the interaction. And the symbol of that is this yellow lightning symbol here in this element. It shows that there is some interaction there. But you cannot use it here in this editing mode. You need to go to preview mode. And then when you click here, it shows, it switches the view to the page what you selected. So this is the way how you can get this basic interactive demos constructed. And this is basically, these are the basic functionalities in the Axure. Some useful features here in this Axure are, for example, what is visible here when I have 3 of these, this kind of, let's say this would be some kind of pie graphs, for example, in the final application. So it is very difficult to set this manually so that they are evenly distributed. And you can do it, of course, but it takes some time. It's much more easier to do if you need to evenly distribute something, that you select all of these, and you can do this by holding Control button. Then you can select multiple. Now when I have these 3 circles, these pie graphs selected, I can right click, and then here is distribute horizontally. Click like so. Now they are evenly distributed among the space. If I would have this one here further out, and then if I again choose distribute horizontally, now the space what is used will be the space from the first one to the last one. So the middle one will set itself to the center. So to do this, all what you need to do is to set the starting point and the ending point here. And then choose the elements and then distribute horizontally, and they are then spaced with the same spacing. Then if you need to have, for example, if you would have some elements, let's see here, for example, that for some reason we would have 3 of these kind of elements which we want to align in some way. I choose all of these, and then I can see this align tool. So I can either align left, so they are all left side aligned. I can align right, so they're all right aligned. or I can align on the center, so they're now center aligned. And then align top will align them on the top side, so now they are on top of each other. So these alignment tools and distributing tools, they are also very useful in certain situations. And then another thing what is useful when you move on to the detailed design, so when you want to start coloring and styling some these widgets. So in user interface design, it is very useful to, very good idea to have this commonality, so that all the elements or components in the design which have the same functionality should look the same. So for example, if here I have a button, so if I would know that, okay, I would like to have my buttons are always with this kind of, okay, not the text color, but the fill color is always with this kind of darkish green. And then that should be with white text and then with quite big font, but in a bolded. And then I would like always to have a shadow here, small shadow like so. So if I would know that, okay, all my, like this positive forward moving button should look like this. Now I set them here. Now if I would go here is another forward moving button. If this would say for example, proceed and do something, I would like to have the same color. I could go here and find the correct color, or use from here from the recent tab. I could choose it here. Okay, now it's that one. And the font, what was the font size? I don't remember anymore. It was 19. Font size should be 19, and then color white. Then it was bolded. And then I had the shadow and so on. So I can do it like this. It like manually, all the buttons. It becomes quite tedious. We only have 2 views and 2 buttons, but then if you have tens of views or I mean pages and large number of buttons or elements which you want to style, doing it like this manually doesn't make much sense. And especially so if you decide that, yeah, by the way, I would like to actually have that the text here in the buttons, there should be a little bit more character spacing, for example, like that. So now if you would have multiple of buttons in many different pages, you would need to go and modify all of them manually to have the same look. So it becomes really, really tedious. So for the detailed design phase, I recommend that you use these style templates, which are available here in the Axure. They're available here. Here is this kind of control, this pen and line symbol. It says manage widget styles. So here I can go on and manage my widget styles. These are the default styles that come in Axure. But I could go on here and add a new style. So this is, for example, proceed button. Then I could have like a cancel button or whatever. But if this is my proceed button, where buttons which have some forward moving action in that application. All right, I can then set the style here that, okay, the font should be 19. Font color is white. I can set all the features here. It has the shadow, then it has this fill color. It was this green. Then it has the character spacing. I think it was something like 2, and so on. So I can set the create these styles. There is now this proceed button. then when I want to use it, I activate the element, and then here from this drop-down menu, I can now select this. Okay, here is the proceed button. This is now the proceed button style. Then I can go here to my another button and say that, yeah, this is also a proceed button. And whenever I create, I can go on here and choose that, okay, it should be a proceed button. And then if at any moment I need to modify I think I forgot the bold setting. If I need to modify the style, for example, it seems that I have forgotten the bold setting since I put this here, the proceed button, and the text was not in bold, but here it is. So it is showing here with the star. I can go here and click on the update that, okay, now it should have the bold or maybe bold italic. I click on the update, and now all the buttons which are using the same style have the same modifications. So this will really save your time when you are fine-tuning your design. Or if I decide that, yeah, maybe it should be this kind of blue, dark blue, this button, go on and then update, and all of those buttons then update. So these are really useful tool what I recommend you to use. Okay, so this is the basics of Axure. There is, of course, lots and lots of other features here as well, but this is enough for now. And what you will have as a homework already for tomorrow is that you should practice this of using this Axure. And the way how you practice this and what the homework is that you should choose some application what is familiar to you. It can be a mobile application or desktop application or web application or whatever. Choose some application and then try to recreate at least a handful of views in that application here in Axure. So if you would, for example, choose, let's say WhatsApp, or for example, Facebook or whatever, or Gmail as your training application. I'm not gonna just search for some UI. Okay, so the WhatsApp application looks like this. So in Axure, you should try to recreate this design, and then create a couple of other views. What are the other possible views in the WhatsApp? I know there is not just this one, but for example, the list where you have your contacts or where you can create a new group and so on. So recreate a couple of those views in Axure. So here the idea is not to design anything. It is simply to practice on using Axure by trying to recreate some user interface of an existing application. So that is the purpose, not to design yet anything, but to recreate an existing application. And I will put this information to Moodle, so that is the homework. And please try to do it by tomorrow. Tomorrow we have classes again. So if and when you have some questions, then we can discuss about those tomorrow. Okay, so that's an example of a design tool. Here are some other design tools listed. They're all very good. This Figma, for example, is very popular. This, if I recall correctly, this runs in a browser, and this is very good in the theme as a theme tool, as it allows so that you are seeing the same view. As you can see here, there are these multiple cursors shown. What people are doing. So this is quite nice. And this has also a free trial. So but this free trial only allows 2 people to work together. So that is the reason why we are not usually using this Figma here, at least in my classes, because very often it is needed that more people than 2 are working on the same tool. Here is actually a new thing, free for students and educators. Do they have some kind of limit? No, okay, this is a good new thing. It wasn't yet in the spring. I think this was not yet here. Okay, yeah, that's a good find. Maybe we will use this in the future also. Yeah, this Figma is a good tool as well. Then where did my slides go? Okay, here. And then another very good is this Adobe XD. This has also some kind of free version. Let's see, for the individual. Yeah, for personal use, this is a free one. Last time I checked, this one did not have any theme functionality. One additional editor, so it seems that only 2 persons can use this one. But yeah, this Adobe XD is also very good tool. And then this pencil tool, this one is an open source tool. This is also a pretty good one. So especially if you are working on some Ubuntu operating system or something, this is something that you can use. And then Balsamiq Mockups is a tool where you can basically do the wireframes like this. So this is focused on low fidelity UI wireframing. And with this, you cannot create like this finished, finalized view, like mockups or finalized prototypes. But this is focused on these wireframes. But this is a very good wireframing tool also. And then there are many others. These are just a handful of examples. Okay, then to design a user interface, it helps if you know some of general user interface design principles. And here is an application example which does not follow any of the design principles. It is exceedingly crowded, has a huge number of features, has no hierarchy in elements, and has very little help like from coloring or positioning or any kind of sizing for the controls to help the user. So like a bad example of a user interface design, even though once you learn it, it might be a very efficient tool. So if you remember the learnability and efficiency criteria in the Nielsen usability qualities, then this tool might be quite efficient once you learn it, but then the learnability is probably not so good. Okay, but the design principles, they are listed here in 4 different categories. Sound quite simple. And the funny thing in user interface design, and especially these principles, are that when you read them or when you hear from them, they feel like that, yeah, I knew this. This is obvious. But then if somebody asks about these guiding principles or how you should create a user interface or you should create a user interface, then it's suddenly exceedingly difficult. So that is a bit strange thing about these. So these principles are simplicity, clarity, consistency, and then pleasant visual outlook. Let's see in detail what they mean. So, okay, simplicity. So this one tries to make you think about that what functionalities your application should have. Because like in the Dilbert comic in the beginning, the fact is that every added feature makes the system more complicated because you must have some way of using those features. So therefore, once you add features, your user interface becomes more complex by the automatically. And every feature is also a chance for a user to make a mistake. So this having a large number of functionalities in your application can have an adverse effect on the learnability and memorability and on the subjective feeling of pleasantness in your application. So what I really encourage you to try to follow in when you are creating an application, try to follow the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. And this not only applies to the features, but also to the general design of the user interface. So try to keep it so that the details are only those what are necessary to understand and use the system. Here I have a couple of YouTube links for an application called Tinder, dating application. I'm sure you are familiar with it. This video is already some years old. I don't know if the application still looks and works exactly the same, but this is the way how it worked previously. And it's presented here. So the application idea is to be a dating application. So what they are presenting are to present these I don't know, what are they called, prospects or persons who you might be interested in. So you get to see a photo and then, as it says here in the caption, determining if they're attractive or not. And that is now the decision what you must make, yes or no. And here is one example of the simplicity, because this process could just as well have been, for example, that you would have needed to give a, let's say, a numeric value for this attractiveness, for example, from 0 to 10. Yes, this is a 7, this is a 4, this is an 8, this is a 10, and so on. But here in this Tinder, they have split or made the design decision that this is a binary decision, yes or no. And with that comes the possibility of making the user interface exceedingly simple, because you can make the decision by okay, where is it here? By simply swiping it. So you swipe right to yes and left to no. And here on the bottom, you can see behind this text, there are these buttons as well. This X for, I guess that means no. And then this yellow heart, which I guess means yes. So it's also possible to click those. But doing with this finger gesture to swipe right or swipe left, yes or no, is a very intuitive way of splitting, of making the interaction to work. This is possible because they have decided that the selection that is either yes or no. If there would be this numeric value, then having this swipe right, swipe left interaction would not, of course, be possible. So this is a great example of simplicity, I think. And yeah, so yeah, that's it about the Tinder. Does it still look like this, or has it changed? Probably you know. you are the target group for this application, I think. 20-something people. No answers. So I guess it's still relatively similar to this one. So this is a great example of that one. And then one adversary of this simplicity is something known as feature creep, because quite often companies want you to buy the same program many times. So it is not enough if you buy it once, but they would like that if you buy it many times, for example, every year. This is evident, for example, if you think about, let's say, Microsoft Office package. It has the text editor, spreadsheet program, then PowerPoint for creating these slides and so on, these functionalities. They have been there at least a decade or maybe even 2 decades already. I don't know when PowerPoint was introduced. The word processing and Excel was there at least for the 90s. So, but since then there has been multiple versions, almost yearly versions, and they have been sold as new software. So the user, when he wants to get the new version, he needs to buy the software again. And this is of course what the company wants, because then the company can make money every year when the user is buying it again. But to get the user to buy it again, there must be some catch. And typically this catch, that why the user would like to buy it, is to add some more features and better features. And then this is then feature creep. So these features, they are creeping in to the product. And even if in the beginning the product was designed to be simple and slick and smooth for the user interface and very focused, then over time, when these new features are added, it might become so that this product becomes increasingly complex and difficult to use. So here is this photo or this screen capture from Microsoft Word for some version some years ago. Not the latest one. They have a little bit different user interface logic. But in this version, they had the idea that you could have these toolbars and they could stack below each other. And you could decide at which toolbars you had visible. And of course, because Word has a huge number of features, then you, of course, can have a huge number of these controls visible. So here on the bottom right is the writing area for the document. And of course, in this image is a little bit exaggerated maybe because the resolution of the window size is so small, but yeah, it's there to highlight the point. Okay, so that is the simplicity. Then for clarity, and here the goal is that the user interface should be presented in a visually logical manner. And for this to be possible, you should understand at least the basics of human visual system. If you're wondering that, what is there to understand, everybody can see, well, here are these visual trick images. I'm sure that you are familiar with many of these. But why I show this is that to try to illustrate the point that the visual perception is not the same as what the facts are actually. So here is this quite interesting. Where are these red and green squares? It seems that there is some color difference between the top and bottom part here. But in fact, the color values are exactly the same. But the perception is that they are not. There is some slight difference. Then here, these diagonal lines, it seems like these are not actually parallel, but there is a slight deviation in the angle. But again, the fact is that they are parallel, and the perception, because of these vertical and horizontal lines, the perception is not correct. Then here, these black squares, it seems like in the intersections, there is something gray, but actually there is no, it's the same white as here on the right and then bottom and top. Then of course these strange 3D tricks, I'm sure you are familiar with these. Then here is again a similar as the diagonal lines. Here they are horizontal lines. It seems that they are not quite parallel, but in fact, if you see the details, they are parallel. But it's something that with these black and white rectangles, which play some tricks to the eyes and the perception. Here is a pretty challenging coloring project. If you would need to color this elephant starting from here, you would go here to the leg. Oh wait, what is this? It goes here. And then is this the leg or is this one or what is going on? So it's quite an interesting trick there. And they go on and on and on and on. Lots of these different different things. Here's about these zebras. Do you know why they have these? What is the effect why they have these black and white stripes? It says that, okay, very hard for the predators. But there is actually also quite interesting, another kind of predator is that some time ago I read some research or news that there are these insects which spread some, I think it was flies which spread some diseases. Or was it that some species of flies, they hatch their eggs in the backs of animals, and it was noticed that these zebras, they had a much less amount of these problems than comparable mules or some other deer kind of animal which had a single color like a gray or a brown color. They had lots of these insect-related problems. And then the researchers had made a study where they basically painted these animals with these black and white stripes. And the result was that the disease-spreading flies were not able to locate the animals anymore. And the amount of diseases and problems with the animals was reduced greatly when they were having this zebra camouflage. So it is not just for big predators like maybe lions or whatever are hunting these zebras, but it's also for the small flies. All right, but in user interface design, you should try to get some clarity to your user interface design. But before we proceed to this one, let's have again a break, and we'll continue at 11:25. I was muted. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. I have to go back then. So, yeah, so the important thing for the designer is to understand that in the human visual observation system, there is an automatic categorization of the visual observations. They are categorized into two sections, something known as target and background. This is important because the background is not given any thought process. So the effect is that if user categorizes something as a background, he doesn't literally see it at all. So you should try to construct your user interface so that it is understood so that the important elements can be understood to be so-called targets and not confused with the background. And here are some visual tricks again, which try to illustrate the observation and how it is done. So what do you think is visible here in this, or what are you seeing in this image?
Triangle.
Triangle. Okay. Any other ideas?
3 Pac-Mans.
3 Pac-Mans. Yeah. So those are the two things what people typically see, and the triangle thing is interesting because it is not drawn here at all. What is drawn here are those 3 black circles with sections missing. But it is implied. But for some reason, many people, me included, see that there is this white triangle on top of these 3 black circles. What do you see here?
Is it a dog?
I don't know. Does anyone else see a dog?
Yes, I see a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think what is visible here is that it's only this black blobs, and somehow you are able to come up with an observation of a dog. Do you see anything else here? What is the dog doing?
It's drinking water or snuffing something.
It's some food.
Yeah. It looks like it has its head down, maybe sniffing something or maybe drinking water. Or here on top left, I think there is something, some kind of a maybe tree or a bush growing from, maybe circled with some rocks or something. But I don't know, there is not enough visual information to make the decision, but somehow it feels like that. And this is the same phenomenon what you see quite often when people swear that they have seen this and that in the sky, in the clouds, or when people see satellite images from Mars and then they recognize that, hey, there is clearly a face there, so there must be an alien temple there, or things like this. So this is one indication of how the visual system tries to find meaning and commonalities between familiar things, even though there might not be enough information available to actually make the decision. Here is user interface from a gas station application, which is used there in the computer to monitor the gas pumps. This is in Finnish.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand Finnish, then the text might be not very meaningful. But the problem here in this application was that, or how this was constructed was so that here in this white area here, it was shown that what kind of fueling was going on and something like this information was shown here. And then some important notifications were shown here on top with these quite big letters. And the story goes so that the company who made this program, they started to receive complaints that that the application does not show certain information, for example, error situations at all or something like this. And then when they analyzed it a little bit, it was shown that the error information or the information what the users were after was displayed here in this area, in this text box. But the users did not see it. They were totally focused on only on these white areas, and whatever was shown here in this gray area, this text, it did not register at all in their thought processes. So they did not see it. So then the company had to modify their user interface so that it was working in a better form. Then in this of creating user interface which can be said that they have this clarity, so that they are understood in a correct way. This principle of grouping is very important. So every time when you are looking something, you are subconsciously categorizing things into groups which somehow belong into the same group, whatever that might be, depending on the situation. And there are different ways how this grouping process unfolds. It can work based on, for example, proximity or similarity. So here are three different these images on top of each other, which all show different situations. So here on the top, what kind of groups would you say that exist?
This is the proximity one. 4 groups.
I don't know. How do you see it? So how would you decide the groups? So 4 groups. So here there are these big and small shapes, rectangles and circles. But then they are quite close each other, these small and big ones. And then there is quite a lot of space here between those groups. So it is quite natural to make the interpretation that here are these groups. Here are these groups of objects. And that decision can be made because they are so close to each other, so the proximity. Then here in the middle one, what do you think? What kind of groups do you see?
One whole group. I don't separate them.
Okay, any other ideas? Total silence. So a large number of people, the majority typically would categorize this so that there are these big and small objects, because there is no the separation of these objects is not giving any meaningful information to split them up into somehow distance or proximity-based groups. So then typically the next step is then to start to think about, or not to think, but to process them by their similarity as shapes. So there are now these big and small shapes. Maybe somebody sees also the actual shapes. Are they circles, big circles, big rectangles, or small rectangles, or small shapes? Then here on the bottom, it is now being introduced the different colors. So these light yellow or orange or whatever is this beige, and then these black ones. So then this color is easy to use as a deciding factor in how to group this. Here is another example of showing the proximity. So you have the two, or this one big image here. At least the way how I see it is that here is one group, and then here is one, here is one, and then here is one. And then if you think about the larger picture, then it might be that, okay, it is split here, and then this is one section, and here this is the another one. And that is because of this white space here, the spacing around here. So here on the right side, there are these three groups of these two columns of two, because there is this little white space here in between. And then here is an example of this kind of form, which has been which is using these principles of proximity and similarity. What can you say about this form? How is it using these principles of proximity and similarity?
And also the colors.
Yeah, so there are similar colors. So here there are three sections of this form created, and it is easy to decide. So that these three sections, so meaning three groups, they have here this section or group heading. It is located here on this kind of left alignment there, and it is with the same color. It is with a little bit stronger font than the contents here, and then the contents inside or below the heading, they are clearly on a lower level of hierarchy, so they are belonging to this heading because they are located below it and then a little bit intended that they're inside. And then a clear indication of these groupings is also this white space here and here. And then if we would add a fourth section, we would put the same amount of white space here, and then the fourth one would begin from there. So it is the similarity. So there is always the same amount of white space. The headings are with the same color. They are on the same level here in this vertical alignment. And then also, speaking about this vertical alignment, it is, or horizontal alignment, however you want to think about. Here you can see that there is clearly this kind of guiding line, which dictates that where should these form fields start. This could have been done in another way, which would have been much more messier. That way would have been, for example, that there could be a line here, and all these texts would be aligned to begin from there. Then the downside would have been that because the length of these texts is different, then these form fields, they would start when there is a short text like gender, it would start maybe here. Then when there is a longer text like birthday, it would start maybe here. And then my name, maybe it would start here. So there would be this kind of jumping line or jumping where do the form fields start, and that brings an exceedingly or very bad looking user interface because it is not very neatly ordered. So here is also that principle used. And then another thing is that these form fields, this whole form, it ends here. So basically these form input fields, they are entered here between this and this line. This is the kind of details what you need to be paying attention to when you are doing user interface design work. And again, this is something which might sound that it is totally irrelevant or it's very simple that yes, of course I know that, but then when you actually create a user interface, it is surprising how many people do not recognize these things before practicing a lot. So here is proximity and similarity. So proximity, these things are close packed, white space, and then similarity, same kind of font, same kind of color, same kind of alignment. Then another principle here in this clarity is continuity. Here is an example here on the right, these key symbols. So these symbols are almost identical except of these two lines. In this top version, these lines are present. Here they are not. And these two very small lines have a big impact on this, how this is understood. Well, here on the top one, it is clearly one key on top of each other. So there is this kind of 3D effect. And here on the bottom, it doesn't look like there are two keys on top of each other, instead that they are joined together. So this tries to illustrate that even small lines have a big impact when they change how the rule of continuity means. How do the lines or shapes, how do they continue? Then there is something known as good shape, good form, which means that humans typically try to understand forms in easiest possible way. Here are again 3 different examples. Here are some blue lines. Then here is this red one is from my book cover. It has these lighter red circles with these sections there. So what do you see here on this collection of blue lines? How do you understand that shape or those shapes? Most likely you see there that there are these letters IBM. That is an example of how these shapes are understood in the easiest possible way, even though they are just a bunch of blue lines. And then here on this red section, most people see this 3D wireframe box, even though these lines, they are not actually drawn there. So for example, here, there is nothing drawn. Here, there is nothing drawn, neither here. But even so, seeing this 3D box here is maybe the easiest possible way of interpreting this one, because what would these pie charts, these slices, what would they mean? There is no meaning in those. So instead we try to find the meaning that, oh yeah, there is this 3D box. And then here, instead of focusing that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on, these individual circles, nobody usually focuses on that one. Instead, they see that, okay, there is this circle of circles. So in the same way as you see this IBM, nobody usually focuses on that. Okay, there are this and this many blue lines, and they are this and this long. What would it mean? What would this line mean compared to this one? People usually don't pay attention at all to that kind of things. They just see, hey, IBM. And then this grouping can also be applied based on movement. So if you see a bunch of objects moving in the same direction, roughly at the same speed, then typically you think about them that, okay, here is one group of things. Here is one image which tries to show these rules in a single glance with these rabbit photos. So proximity, here 3 groups of 4. Similarity, here there is no proximity thing in effect, so different color, they are similar. Then okay, this closure, this is pretty well same thing to the proximity. Then connectness, when we add small connecting lines, even to complex shapes as these rabbits, they suddenly have a big meaning. And then this kind of continuation, if the shape continues somehow, even as individual objects, they are easily seen as a group. And then if they share some kind of common region, common background region. So here there is no real difference between the distance of these bunnies. Instead, it's these white separating lines separate the blue background. So these are called Gestalt principles of grouping. So well-known grouping principles and well-studied. And these are all in effect in the user interface design, like we saw earlier with the form example. So when you understand these principles of grouping, you should be able to build user interfaces which seem naturally correct and are easy to use. The easy to use thing is achieved when users understand the user interfaces naturally. And another example of this proximity could be, for example, so that, and also in general in user interface design, that when you want to do some effect, put the control of doing that close to the target of that effect. So that's one example of how proximity could be applied. And it makes the user interface faster. For example, for that reason that you don't have to move the mouse cursor or your finger, for example, so far away. So it makes no sense to have some control on the other side of the screen to affect the other side of the screen. Much more better to put all these closely together. Then one thing what is good to be aware of that there is this automatic filtering going on every day, all the time with people. So only a limited amount of information what you see is being actually processed, and rest of the information is discarded before or as long as you don't focus your attention to that information. For example, if you are walking in the forest, you very rarely consider that how many trees you are seeing, or you don't consider that what kind of rocks are there on the path where you are walking. That information is discarded. And it is only once you decide to focus your attention that, okay, let's see these rocks. How do they look like? Here is a granite rock, here is this other type of rock, and so on. It is only at that moment when you when you decide to focus on it. And for this reason, whenever you are trying to learn a new skill, for example, driving a car, when you are very early in that phase, probably you can relate to the fact that if somebody is talking to you at the same time when you are driving the car, you might feel very distracted and confused because you are focusing most of your processing capability on actually driving the car and monitoring the traffic situation. So if somebody is then talking to you and asking some questions and expecting some responses, the situation can be very difficult and stressful. So this is one clear example. And then when you get better on it, when you have more experience in driving the car, then it becomes like an automatic process so that you don't have to focus on it consciously. So then you can, for example, discuss with the other people in the car, and the actual car driving process is more or less automatic. So this is one example of how this information is being processed and discarded all the time by your sensory system. So when you want to grab the attention of a user in a user interface, you can try different things. Here are some of those things. They are not in the order of importance. There are things like unusual shapes, large color contrasts, for example, or moving things. That is, by the way, reason why most of the advertisements, what you see on the web, they are always animated, because the designers of those ads know that movement gets the attention. That's the reason why they're animated. Then, for example, realistic colorful images, they are typically in user interfaces something which grab attention, and that is the reason why they should not be used as background images very often. Then empty space around the target, meaning that something has lots of empty space. It must be important. And then familiar things like your name, that typically also grabs the attention. Okay, maybe we will stop here and continue tomorrow with the rest of this user interface theoretical information. And as I said, the homework is to pick some application and then try to recreate that application user interface, a handful of views with Axure. So the idea is not to design a new WhatsApp, but the idea is just to create a WhatsApp user interface views in the Axure. For example, if your topic is WhatsApp. Okay, any questions so far about anything?
No, thank you.
All right, then we will continue tomorrow. Have a nice day and bye.
Bye. Same for you.
Bye.